like to call the Town Council of Corte Madera into session for Tuesday, January 21. Could you please take a roll call, please?
Councilmember Bailey.
Here.
Councilmember Kuhnhart.
Here.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Here.
Vice Mayor Beckman.
Here.
Mayor Andrews.
Here. And can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I stand for the Constitution. Yes.
Okay, the first item of business is open time, which is anyone can speak for 3 minutes on any item that is of interest to them that is not otherwise covered on the agenda. So everyone has 3 minutes.
Oops.
Good evening. My name is Margaret Bandel. I live in Corte Madera on the east side.
Your mic's not on,
I think it's on, but not close.
or you aren't yelling enough.
I'm short.
There we go.
There. Okay. I live at 180 Prince Royal Drive in Corte Madera. And I'm here this evening because I recently heard of an idea that I think might work or really be a good idea for Corte Madera. My brother-in-law was visiting from Ithaca, New York, which is upstate New York. And it's a town that's very concerned with recycling and preserving the environment. And he said that every so often what they do is bring a truck to a central location, one of those confidential shredding trucks. And people can bring up to 6 big boxes of confidential material that they want shredded. And it's a service that the town provides for the people. And as I sat there after New Year's shredding all my things that needed shredding, I realized that you can't put that stuff in the recycle bin because it's just pieces of loose paper and it gets matted down by the wet. And if you put it in a plastic bag, they don't accept it. If you put it in a paper bag, well, no one has paper bags anymore, at least I don't, because I bring recycling bags to the supermarket. And I thought it might be kind of like the chipper days, have shredding days, and it might be a really good publicity and good bang for the buck that Corte Madera could provide for citizens, maybe after Christmas and spring cleaning or something.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Andrews and council members. I'm Dennis Rodoni. I'm your Board of Supervisor member. It's a pleasure to represent Corte Madera, and I just wanted to check in with you, your first meeting of the new year, wishing you a happy new year, and I look forward to a long and prosperous working relationship with the council and the management here. Staff does a great job, as does the council members, and it's always a pleasure to hear from you and be part of the work you're doing, so thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. We appreciate having you here.
Hi, Pat Ravazio, 427 Oakdale Avenue. First, I want to say thank you for the thank you. Whoever put the nice little sign out on the road here, right in front of Town Hall, that if you're driving under the speed limit, it says you're going 17. Thank you. And I'm like, oh my God, that was amazing. I'm using up my time. I'm actually here to talk to you about Measure D. There's only been one council member so far who has made a decision on this as far as I know. It's a complicated issue, and I really want to encourage you to look into it. The golfers who got angry when the county was negotiating to try to purchase the property filed a lawsuit, and they won, and they were able to put a measure on the ballot for this March, Measure D, which will basically, if the Measure D passes, it will restrict use of that land for golf. Or if they want to do something other than golf, it would have to go to county voters again. The main reason why I'm involved in this, I'm actually a golfer. I actually like playing golf. But the reason I got involved in this is that this is about loss of local control. The San Geronimo Valley has a community plan, and this measure is trying to revise and override that community plan. So it was basically saying that if the whole county gets together, they can tell a community what they should do in their own community. So I think that alone should be a deciding factor. And also the fact that even if the measure passes, it won't bring golf back. The current owner of the land is the Trust for Public Land, whose full intention, and I interviewed the founder the other day, the full intention is to turn it over to the public and make it a commons and a park, and it is level, beautiful land where you can bicycle without having to get into knockups with cars. The kids can play there, older people can be there, and I think the important thing to remember is that it always was a public commons. It was only 50 years ago that a developer came in, was planning to put in a lot of houses, decided to put the golf course in neck first, and then the housing didn't go through, and so the county's kind of been trying to help him out for many years, and the time has come for the community to reclaim the land for the public and for nature, so we don't have all those pesticide applications right next to the endangered coho. There's 101 great uses for this property, and not one of them is golf. So I hope you'll vote no on Measure D. And if you want more information, sangeronimoval.com, or call me, because I've been working with them now for over a year. Actually, I'm on the planning committee for the property itself. So if we defeat Measure D, it's going to be a whole new, beautiful, countywide park and commons. And gee, I didn't even go over. I thought you were letting me go over. Well, thank you for listening.
Anyone else? Okay, public, I'll close open time. The next item is the consent calendar. The purpose of the consent calendar is to group items together which are routine or have been discussed previously and do not require further discussion. They will be approved by a single motion. Any member of the town council, town staff, or the public may request removal of an item for discussion.
Move to approve items A through O.
Mr. Mayor, I have a quick question about 4D, if I
sorry.
may.
Okay.
Yeah, so 4D, that is about the extending the contracts related to the climate adaptation plan. I just had a question for staff on page 3 of that staff report, top paragraph of that page. We see that the proposed contract would allow for Adaptation International to develop concepts for 7 out of the 8 identified study areas, where only that area, the only area that would be deferred is the flood control network in Madera Gardens, and that's going to be a standalone project. So I was just curious if staff could speak to the interrelationship between this standalone project in Madera Gardens and the larger climate adaptation plan. Is that going to be borrowing from the same strategies and findings of that plan, just to make sure that it's not duplication of work or loss of efficiency or anything like that?
So yeah, absolutely. We'll take any data or any information we have from the CAP and try to fold that into that Madera Gardens assessment. That's really a detailed flood control assessment. Scope and fee, it's similar to the size of the CAP, so it's much larger in magnitude than these other transportation concepts that are in the 10 to 15K range. So it's a much more extensive effort, really drilling down into our pump stations, our detention basins, looking at our whole system.
It's great, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I've got 4 quick things. One of them is, while we're on that one, it struck me that the map that's included with that item is incomplete, that it doesn't include the area which is not strictly in Corte Madera, but just north. And how can we pretend to protect the shore if we're not going to protect the whole shore? And so I congratulate you for adding in some additional money for SF Estuary Institute. I think that's really great. But is there an answer for why the map is incomplete?
You're talking about like the bank of Corte Madera Creek?
This whole end here, the northern end, is missing any study. And if it's simply that we can only spend money on Corte Madera, then the question becomes, how are we going to get Larkspur and the county to step up for that critical northern tip of the study area?
Correct, yeah. So there are some limitations with the grant funding of how we can spend it. But separate of that, some of the concepts that we might develop, say at Lucky Drive or along the smart railroad right away or Mariners Cove could also speak to solutions in those areas. So, some of those low-level banks are similar enough in concept where we can draw from the areas that we've identified as study areas and pass that information to those other jurisdictions.
Okay, well, we'll get into that. Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry that I have three other things quickly.
Can we
One,
pull it?
4C, I have questions on 4C, 4M, and 4N.
Dear. Okay, let's pull all of them.
One of them is tiny
Okay.
spelling. 4C, 4M, and 4N. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Are we done with, are you satisfied?
I'm done.
I'm satisfied on the 4D matter. For now.
Okay, any public questions for 4D? No? Okay. Anyone want to move 4D?
I think I'll make a motion that we move all items on the calendar except for 4C, 4M, and 4N.
And I'll second that, and this is the longest consent calendar I have ever seen.
Yes, it is. That's right.
That's why I wanted to make the motion.
Councilmember Bailey?
Yes.
Councilmember Kuhnhart?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beckman?
Yes.
Mayor Andrews?
Yes. Okay. So we're now,
4C.
4C.
It's
4C?
very simply that we jiggered the scope of work on the High Canal, and I congratulate RJ and the DPW for saving some money and doing a good job. I've walked that High Canal now, and it really does look good, and especially congratulations for being able to raise a unsolicited letter of praise from the ever-watchful Cindy Winter. Congratulations. That's all on 4C. 4M, the hotel FAR, there is a discussion paragraph in which, in that discussion paragraph of the hotel FAR motion, there is reference to staff modified the ordinance in order to avoid concentration. And I was wondering, Adam, perhaps, to what does that refer? And is that something that was modifying what we wanted or modifying? And how did you arrive at that modification to have just essentially, I think you're saying, only one hotel per each of those study areas?
Yeah, so this was done for two reasons. One was in response to some of the commentary and discussion that that staff had when we brought this this draft policy in front of the town council in August of 2019. And so, in a sense, responds to this idea of clustering or over-concentration potentially of hotels that might seek to use this ordinance. Secondly,
Did we ever discuss that here?
it was raised. It was raised during a discussion of the town council at that time. But
in
secondly,
2018, when it first came up?
both in 2018 and in August of last year.
Okay.
But I think also secondarily, and perhaps more importantly, when we started looking at the CEQA analysis, then what would be required to undertake that analysis in a way that was going to not be unwieldy in a sense. The limitations on essentially how many times this ordinance could be used, or sort of the maximum amount of development that one might expect from that, it essentially becomes a way to simplify and contain the scope of the analysis. While I still, in my judgment, I felt that it still accomplished the economic development goals that were sort of fundamental to the ordinance. So this was part of what was required in order to undertake the CEQA analysis. And ultimately, though, it will have to come back. I mean, it's not a final and set, essentially, ordinance by any stretch. It's just in order to do the CEQA analysis that needs to be done. And then it will come back for public hearings in front of the Planning Commission and the Town Council at that time. If there needs to be any modifications, we would have to, is definitely a possibility. It would just need to be run through the CEQA analysis again to make sure that it still is covered by whatever analysis we did.
Thank you. The only other question I would have is, I didn't see in the written report, what's the timing of that environmental analysis, and when are we going to get on with it?
So the initial study, we said, is expected to be completed by March. So that would be the analysis phase. It's a couple of months, from now, at which point we would expect that we would be able to do the 30-day public noticing period. So, and then come back to the Planning Commission after that for public hearing.
Thank you very much. I'm satisfied on those three. That 4N is a gigantic problem. In the discussion of the Climate Active Action Committee, there were two members of the public who spoke to us, and unfortunately, the notes misspelled both of those names. Ms. Goody is Goody, not E. And architect James Bill, it's not Bell, but Bill, James Bill. Yes, he has two first names. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, let me see, would somebody?
I move
motion
that,
for
I move that,
4C?
I move that we come back and approve 4C, 4M, and 4N,
With
With
modification.
amendment for 4N.
with the correction on 4N spelling.
Second?
Councilmember Bailey?
Yes.
Councilmember Kuhnhart?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beckman?
Yes.
Mayor Andrews?
Yes. Okay, the next item is 6A, consideration and possible adoption of resolution number 05-2020, approving Corte Madera Chamber of Commerce 2020 budget and accepting the financial statements audited for the years ending December 31, 2018 and December 31, 2017. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Andrews and council members. This is an annual item that typically comes before you in December, but as we canceled our last meeting in December, the Chamber of Commerce allowed us the opportunity to hear this in January instead. And the reason why the council votes on the budget for the Chamber of Commerce is because in 1989, the Corte Madera voters approved a ballot measure increasing the transient occupancy tax from 8% to 10%, with that new 2% being set aside and allocated to the Chamber of Commerce and spent under stipulation set out in resolution number 2511, which is also included as an attachment to the staff report. And that resolution is lays forth the expenses that are allowed under that transient occupancy tax, and brings the opportunity for the council to review the proposed expenditures by the Chamber of Commerce, and also requires that the council accept the financial statements for the 2 previous years at the same time. The Chamber of Commerce typically proposes a conservative budget because the transient occupancy taxes can vary from year to year, and they acknowledge that. And in this year, the budget remained relatively constant, and the only change to note was an increase in the expenditure proposed for the assistant to the executive manager. And the reason for that increase was to allow more flexibility in hiring and allow them the flexibility to work with the hours and the hourly rate, and hopefully find someone who can do the work that they need to be done, and help Julie Kritzberger get more work done in the office and take on more projects. So if anyone here wants to apply, she will be recruiting in March. Chamber Executive Manager Julie Kritzberger and Chamber President Stan Hoffman are both here today to answer any questions you have on the budget, but other than that, that concludes my staff report.
Any questions? Any public comments or questions? Okay. Any motions?
I'll make a motion that we adopt resolution number 05/2020, approving the Corte Madera Chamber of Commerce 2020 budget and accepting the financial statements audit for the years ending December 31st, 2018 and December 31st, 2017. Sorry, Eli, I'm supposed to get the whole thing.
I'm
out.
sorry.
No worries.
Still second. If you're done.
Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Bailey?
Yes.
Councilmember Kuhnhart?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beckman?
Yes.
Mayor Andrews?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next is 6B, second reading and possible adoption of ordinance number 992 to repeal and replace Chapter 18-31, accessory dwelling units, and amend Chapters 1804, definitions, 1818, special purpose overlay district, and 1820, off-street parking and loading related to accessory dwelling units regulations.
Mr. Mayor, I need to recuse myself. I've got my business presents a conflict of interest.
Okay,
Thank
good.
And, Mr. Mayor, because I live on Christmas Tree Hill, the town attorney has advised that I may appear to have a conflict of interest. Even though I disagree with that, I'm going to comply with the advice of counsel and recuse myself. We have, by the way, filed a letter of appeal to the California Fair Political Practices Commission to say, hey, can I participate? Answer's not in yet, so I've got to be out of here.
Good enough.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. The next item before you is the second reading and possible action to adopt ordinance number 992 to repeal and replace Chapter 1831 and amend Chapters 1804, 1818, and 1820 related to accessory dwelling unit regulations. The council conducted a public hearing and introduced ordinance number 992 on December 3rd, 2019. The draft ADU ordinance includes development standards to minimize impacts to adjacent property owners. Staff will review ADU applications for conformance with these standards once the ordinance becomes effective. And these standards include such things as size, height, windows, and lighting, among others. In the meantime, staff will review ADU applications for conformance with the new state legislation, which became effective on January 1st, 2020. Staff recommends that the council adopt the ordinance to avoid a delay in the town's ADU ordinance becoming effective. Since the December 3rd meeting, the town has received several comment letters related to this ordinance, which are included as attachment 3 to your staff report. The public comments address fire safety concerns in Christmas Tree Hill, the proposed window development standard, discretionary review for ADUs, and the required method of water supply and sewage disposal for ADUs. The second reading of the ordinance has been placed on the agenda as a business item instead as on the consent calendar, since there are a few members of the public who have indicated they would like to speak on this topic. And the options available to the council this evening include 1, approving the attached ordinance as presented, or continuing this item to a future date. And that concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions that you have.
Comments, questions?
Questions? Yeah, I have a question. If, I know there's a lot of comment from the public on this. If we do not pass this tonight, what happens? Is that, I know this is our second reading, so I guess this is for the attorney and our manager, I guess, or Adam, I don't know, whoever wants to address that.
I can start. And what we are doing actually right now, since we are beyond January 1st right now, we are essentially defaulting to state law and the provisions of our existing ordinance that are consistent with state law. So it's sort of, we're melding those two things together. So the state legislation, which was in, I think it's AB 881, is in effect today. And so we are reviewing new applications for accessory dwelling units pursuant to those regulations.
Pursuant to state law.
Correct.
Okay.
And have we received any?
We do have a couple of pending applications.
Yeah, there are several building permits that have been submitted for ADUs. The new state law has provisions where if it's a detached ADU under 800 square feet, you apply for a building permit instead of an ADU permit. And also if the ADU is within an existing structure, then you apply for a building permit. So there are a couple of building permit applications, and then there are several people that staff has been communicating with who are exploring ADUs on their properties.
And we are advising them to, look into the proposed ordinance here, and most people seem to be doing that at this point, but they're following the process of the council here.
So if we were to pass this ordinance tonight, how would that affect any of the building permits or anything? Would there be any effect?
Yes. So the new state legislation says that the town has 60 days with which to approve an application for an accessory dwelling unit. So, we would look to, if an application came in today, and we would look to the fact that if this ordinance was enacted, it would go into effect in 30 days. And we would have within our means the ability to review and approve the application with the proposed ordinance rather than existing state law. So that's how we're handling the applications that would require an accessory dwelling unit permit. Those that are applying just for a building permit are a little bit more complicated. We are, in discussions right now about how we actually should handle those. One approach, which I think is the most consistent with how other permits are handled through the building code, would be that if an application for a building permit is applied for today, it would use the existing ordinances or state laws in effect. It's the submission of the building permit which sort of triggers the, I don't want to call it vesting because I think that's too strong a word, but makes, in the sense of what regulations should be used to review the building code application or the building permit application. I think the analogy we used was oftentimes, for example, we just switched building code adoption as in 2019 from the 2016 code to the 2019 code, and we often get people submitting the day, the week before December 31st to get in under the 2016 code rather than 2019. But in any case, that's sort of under how we're operating currently. Although the issue really specifically hasn't come up or come to a head in terms of inconsistency with regulations right now.
And if we want to make changes tonight at some point that are inconsistent with state law, what happens if we go ahead and try to ratify that? What can you just kind of take us through how that would work and what would happen?
Well, if you make any changes tonight that are anything other than sort of typographical corrections, you would need to reintroduce the ordinance.
Right.
Which means that it would come back again for a second reading and adoption at your next council meeting. So the process for when the ordinance takes effect would essentially be kicked by 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks, right? Yes, 2 weeks. Because it would be 30 days from adoption. The adoptions would not occur until the beginning of February, so you'd be looking at an effective date in early March. If you make changes, your question was if we make changes that are inconsistent with state law, then what happens after we adopt the ordinance, it then gets submitted to HCD under the new process, which took effect on January 1st. HCD then will review and make a determination and advise the town if HCD thinks that any aspect of the ordinance is in violation of state law. If that happens, the town is then given an opportunity to respond to HCD, and that response could be to indicate that the council is going to look at this again with a proposal to re-amend the ordinance in order to make the correction, or the council could decide not to amend the ordinance and to leave the ordinance as it is, in which case HCD could make a referral for an enforcement action with the AG's office. So there is a process to correct should HCD decide that any aspect violates state law.
Any other questions? Any public comment?
Members of the council, I'm Phil Simon for Simon Ranch Road. We wrote a letter that's in the packet, but I also need to add an issue that I brought up with staff recently that may affect not only our plans, but those of the entire town. There seems to be a conflict between the proposed ordinance and state law, probably caused by a redundant and confusingly written part of the state law. It says that a local agency shall not establish by ordinance criteria that does not permit at least an 800 square foot ADU that is at least 16 feet in height with 4-foot setbacks. That's section 65-852.2, subdivision C, paragraph 2, subparagraph C. Consequently, the proposed ordinance under 18.31.080 states the maximum allowable size of any ADU that reduces setbacks beyond otherwise applicable standards is 800 square feet. Whereas state law states a setback of no more than 4 feet from the side and rear lot line shall be required for an ADU that is not converted from an existing structure. In other words, just a detached ADU. That's section 65-852.2, subdivision A, paragraph 1, subparagraph D, clause 7. In other words, the state requires 4-foot setbacks for all ADUs of any allowed size. But more importantly, the town ought to look at this. Even in the face of what might be a few undesirable state mandates, we can't regulate our way into preserving desirable town characteristics by coming up with arbitrary measurements of buildings and space. We can instead establish the most restrictive requirements that the state will allow, and then apply the greatest discretion allowed in order to approve designs that do indeed retain the desirable things that we want for the town. I encourage you to consider this approach.
Any other speakers?
Louise Brown, 9 Summit Drive on Christmas Tree Hill. We've also written several letters that have been included, one most recently in this packet and previously. I'd like to read just an excerpt from that letter. But first, I'd like to thank both the council and the staff for being available to discuss this issue between meetings and to help clarify what the state law is mandating. We understand that the state has put the town and indeed all local governing bodies in a difficult position with the new state law that explicitly supersedes any existing zoning regulations related to ADUs. This has stripped local control on its face, but should not silence local concerns and efforts to adopt the new state legislation in a responsible way for the local community, one in which the public safety of the local community is prioritized and preserved. The state's aggressive pursuit and implementation of dual strategic imperatives to increase housing while also hardening the state against the devastating effects of wildfires come into direct conflict when considering the impact of the ADU regulations on areas known as wildland urban interfaces, or WUIs. Christmas Tree Hill neighborhood is a designated WUI and is not designed for and can ill afford added density. Christmas Tree Hill has a specific zoning designation called the Overlay District within the town's general plan. one that is informed by a comprehensive, thoughtful, and data-driven analysis of the Hill's unique physical constraints. The Christmas Tree Hill zoning provides for accessory dwelling units, but places a reasonable cap on the total number, 10% of the total housing units or 25 total ADUs on the Hill. That keeps density within safe parameters. We're urging the town to preserve the thoughtful study and analysis that initially triggered the development and implementation of our zoning district on Christmas Tree Hill, not disallowing ADUs, but wisely establishing a maximum number that can be allowed in order to protect public safety and ensure emergency response and provide for safe evacuation. Christmas Tree Hill represents just 6.7% of the total housing units in Corte Madera. It does not seem unreasonable to exclude such a small fraction of the total housing units when adopting and otherwise complying with state law. I know that this presents a difficult problem for the town to go against state mandates, but I do think that there are a number of other towns and communities who also have WUIs that would band together with Corte Madera to go to the state to request local controls in these types of situations. Thank you.
Any other speakers?
I'm Mike Anderson. I'm over in Corte Madera, East Corte Madera. Just was looking at the provisions of this, and I had a question of something that's, I think, worded pretty weird, and I just want to make sure I understand it. It's under the 18.31.080 9 windows. And this affects me directly, so I want to make sure I understand what's going to be happening. It says that all windows that face a side yard adjoining a side yard or a rear yard of an adjacent property are located within 15 feet of the shared property line that shall be clerestory windows. And then it says, and this is where I'm confused, except that this standard does not apply if a structure on the adjacent property does not have any non-clerestory windows on the building. Do I assume that double negative means if I have regular windows on my side, on my house, that the standard is still going to be in play? Thank you. And then we also had a question about discretionary review. That is still something that is going to be imposed on, or shall I ask a question on? Excuse me. Your question.
The question was, I didn't see in here where it says that there is no discretionary review. If someone complies with all of these ADU requirements, that there is no discretionary review, that this is it. Did I miss that, or is that not in here?
It's ministerial, I believe.
I'm sorry?
So review of ADUs is a ministerial action, so there is no discretion. The prior version of the ordinance that went to the Planning Commission included some options for discretionary review, whereas if someone didn't meet a development standard or wanted to exceed a development standard, they could apply for a design review. The Commission took out all of those options, and then at the December 3rd meeting, the Council did put back in the allowance for an ADU that exceeded the standards in the ordinance with approval of a design review by the Planning Commission.
But that was the only...
Yes, the size.
The only reason for a design review.
Correct. The ordinance before the council tonight only has one option for discretionary review, and that is to exceed the sizes established in the ordinance up to a maximum of 1,200 square feet.
Thank you. I was a little bit late, so I apologize, but I did hear the ending of this gentleman's discussion, and I did want to thank everybody for all their hard work in coming up with this document. It's a lot of work. And I cannot say enough how much I agree with this gentleman that as much discretion as you guys can put on this ordinance, I know your hands are tied, but whatever you can do to monitor, because that's the next step in this, is monitoring all of these ADUs, not just in building permits, but making sure that they're rented for 30 days, that they're all of the other provisions are complied with. and if there is a JADU, that there is an owner in that building. You know, you just, whatever you guys can do to make sure that we retain Corte Madera the way that it was when we moved in 30 years ago.
Any more public questions?
Just a real quick comment that I want to encourage you to be brave in taking on the state. I think they are noted for their hasty laws, the freelance thing that just came out as an example, and I think they need communities like ours to challenge them. So I would say, you know, maybe if you have to pass it tonight and then immediately get to work on making the revisions that we know need to be there, including accepting the areas that really can't afford the density. And I don't know if it's just Christmas Tree Hill. She made me think of Alta Way on Chapman Hill, which is really narrow. There's not a room for a single other car on that street. And so maybe we got to go through the town and start isolating which areas really can't handle the density and then press it with the state if we have to. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Sloan?
I have a question, if you don't mind. I'm not sure whom should answer. Can somebody remind me how the Christmas Tree Hill Overlay District connects with the ADU ordinance? In a simplified way, sorry.
Yes.
Just dumb it down for me.
So there are 11 capacity districts in Christmas Tree Hill, and there's an allotment of ADUs that are allowed within each capacity district. A total of 25 ADUs are allowed. And per our ordinance, that 25 includes new attached or new detached ADUs. It does not include existing spaces. So someone could convert a basement or an accessory structure, and that's not included in the cap. And then one thing we have done in our ordinance, because the state makes a big distinction between new ADUs and the conversion of existing spaces, so we created a 5-year rule where someone could not come in and do an addition or a new accessory structure and then come back and convert it to an ADU. They would need to wait at least 5 years to make that conversion of now existing space to an ADU.
Okay.
Follow-up question to that then. So if they make that conversion of an existing space, are they exempt from adding additional parking under this law?
Correct. So conversion of existing space does not require parking per new state law.
Okay. I thought so. I just wanted to clarify.
Right. Just to add a little bit, they also may be exempted from parking if they're within a half-mile walking distance to public transit, so a bus stop. So I think a significant amount of Christmas Tree Hill would also be exempt on that ground, even if it...
Because Mankey Park is right there.
Correct.
But it's not a circle half mile, isn't it?
It's a walking distance. Yeah.
So somebody'd have to walk it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. Further questions?
No, but I'll make my comments if you'd like to hear them.
Very good.
Try to be as quick as I can. Okay. Mr. Simon, thank you again for coming out. We do respect your property, and I think you're a good caretaker for it. With response to your comments, it's my sense two things. Number one, we would all like broader discretionary review. That's like what we'd like, local control of some kind. We can't. Like the ordinance, the way it's been written and already read through once, is as far as I think we can legitimately push it without violating state law. And the reason why it's unsatisfactory, but maybe less unsatisfactory than it could have been, is because our planning commission did the best they could to try to impose some objective standards which are applicable. But the sort of basic local control, we believe here in Corte Madera, as I'm sure you do and your family has for years, that we are best positioned to observe and pass our own regulations. We lose some of that control, and this is a perfect example of that. So I'm sorry you feel like your property cannot be isolated out, but it's not realistic to isolate out specific properties in the ordinance. I've tried to be, and I think we have sent at least a general signal that although it may be a slightly more complex and bureaucratic process, I think that you'll find that the Planning Commission and others will be responsive to concerns and questions you have as you do development projects on your property. So I read the Brown letter 2 or 3 times, actually, because I think you guys did a good job pointing out kind of what the issues are there. But there's a couple of problems there. The basic one is that to the extent there has been the exceptions we've just heard about with the 5-year limitation, I think that's as far as objectively that we can push it without doing what Pat Ravazio has suggested, which is picking a fight with the state. I'm not sure that I disagree with that in broader concept, but I'm not prepared to visit the town on some massive litigation where we're against the state of California. It's just not realistic, and I'm not sure we would be good stewards of our own town if we did that in this instance. I think instead, it is better to maintain some semblance of local control by passing an ordinance with some kind of objective standards, which in our view pass the survivability test, if you will, and will not be subject to being overridden by state law, and maintains at least some kind of objective imprint on how development will go in our town for these ADUs. And I guess that pretty much sums up my comments to it. But we do appreciate, we take seriously, we read carefully every letter that's written to us. Some of them I've read more than once and thought about it. We make calls to our planning commissioner and others to try to understand the issues. Please don't think we don't take it seriously, but what you see here represents a fairly significant amount of work product, and I think it's thoughtful, even if it doesn't fairly address everybody's hopes. I learned once in school that the hallmark of a good resolution is something that is mutually dissatisfactory. So we're not particularly happy with it either, but I think it's the best we could do under the circumstances. Those are my comments, sorry.
You sound like an attorney.
You learned that, right?
Yeah.
Got comments?
Yeah, I do.
So on balance, I'd go for it, I think.
Slightly different place for
Okay.
a change. Usually I'm right
Okay.
with you, but I agree. I think we need to go ahead and pass this tonight and get this on the books so that we can get our own laws. But I would immediately begin in exploring an amendment of some kind for the WUI, specifically Christmas Tree Hill. And I know that's going to cause ramifications with the state. I think I would be careful about the way we would do it. I've already spoken to our state representative about this, and I would try to get other towns involved. This is not a problem just for us, but it is going to be portrayed in the press as Marin County trying to get out of development, right? And the issue here is that we've got a WUI zone up there on Christmas Tree Hill. It's only 6.7% of the town's population. And I walk up there all the time. We cannot afford to jam a bunch more units in there. It's going to create a safety issue. And the fact that the state is moving ahead with this and forcing people to put allowing people to put ADUs in areas like this when we're having some of the worst wildfires in history is, to me, just crazy. And we cannot let it happen in this town. And I think we will have lots of friends in Marin County and across the state if we do this correctly and try to get this changed and try to adapt something that will work and make it work for us. But I think we need to figure out a way to keep that overlay in place on Christmas Tree Hill and maybe consider adding it up on Alto and maybe in some other places in town. As I said, it's only 6.7% of the population of the whole town, according to the data I saw, and we need to figure out a way to do this. This is a big problem. I was in a meeting today speaking with an insurance broker, and they are not writing fire insurance on most new home purchases in the hills of Mill Valley anymore, and also in Fairfax.
Right.
Okay, this is a big problem, and if we start allowing a bunch of ADUs in an area like Christmas Tree Hill, we're just exacerbating the problem. We're having the worst wildfires in history. It's just crazy to me. So I think we need to figure out a way. We've got to be practical here, I think, pass the law so that we got our laws in place, but at the same time, we need to start a project here and figure out what we need to do to amend this to preserve the safety of the people in this town, because that's our primary responsibility, is the safety and welfare of the people in this town. And that's what we need to do. And if that puts us at odds with the state, so be it. I'm more than happy to do it, but we need to do it.
Okay. When I'm looking at this ordinance and I'm thinking back over the last couple of decades and the hundreds of thousands of dollars that our town has spent identifying FEMA floodplains and working with FEMA floodplains so we could identify safe areas to build housing or ways to modify housing so it's safe. We're working on a sea level rise analysis, okay? 2008, we identified the wildfire areas. And all of that is to give us an opportunity to allow folks to build housing, but safely. And folks in Sacramento are just irresponsible. They just sat there and said, we need more housing. You'll put it wherever we want. And since it's affordable housing, I guess they assume that affordable housing means poor people live there and they have less to lose. So we will mandate putting more housing up in these hills. What makes it especially sweet is after this law goes in 2022, the planning department's going to have to identify evacuation routes. Okay? So I'm thinking your suggestion that we push back on the overlay, maybe we need to accelerate updating the health section of our general plan to specify what the evacuation routes are, and if there's a lot of places with one way in, one way out, and it's 9 feet wide, and the fire engines are 8.5 feet wide, maybe we really shouldn't encourage further development on that particular section of street. So anyway, I am going to support this ordinance because it is slightly less irresponsible than what the state mandated. But anyway.
So
Can I just add one more thing? You brought up something else. I said I was in a meeting with an insurance broker this morning about this. One of the things she said was they're going in and measuring street widths.
Bingo.
And if it's less than 20 feet, they aren't writing fire insurance. They're just not. There are whole neighborhoods that are not getting fire insurance, and the only way to get it is through the state. And it's crazy for us to increase density in areas like that.
Exactly.
It's just nuts.
So, Bob, just to be
Ludicrous that they're
clear,
making us do this.
I do actually agree with your comments there. So we remain in unison.
Oh,
The
thank
difference is that, and I think this is where there's no disconnect. The specific ordinance in front of us is you're also up with, right? You're okay with it. It's
Yeah.
not that it's and
As I
so
said, I
the
think-
specific thing, right? We're still on board with. And then the second thing is I just don't want to fight alone. Like if we're going to fight the state, we need to get more towns with us. That's all.
I think our representative to the legislative committee should jump right on that.
He's kind of a jackass, but I get what you're saying.
I think.
It's me. That's why he's saying that. I was talking about myself. That's why he's saying it. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so I'll make the motion that we adopt the ordinance, number 992, to repeal and replace chapters 18.31, 18.04, and amend chapters 18.04, 18.18, and 18.20 related to accessory dwelling unit regulations.
Second?
Councilmember Bailey?
Yes.
Councilmember Kuhnhart? Recused. Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beckman? Recused. Mayor Andrews?
Yes. Okay. So I guess we need to wake up the boys.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, is it Mark? Similar. I thought you meant McGuire.
No. McGuire, I don't know. I've known Levine. He and I started together, and he was like,
I think he's good.
he's really good. He was like, just be careful, you won't become a target.
He's also like kind of wonky in a good way. He gets deep into the weeds of the language.
Okay.
This was fun.
Do you need to record that they came back?
He suggested talking with the MCCMC.
As the paper said about the 49ers, they're back.
Okay.
Okay. The next item of business is 6C, consideration and possible adoption of Resolution 06-2020, approving the 2019-20 mid-year budget revision.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Town Council members. This item is concerning the mid-year budget revision, and you have the staff report before you. There are 6 funds that would be affected by this proposed budget revision. The first is the general fund, which is the town's operating fund, which is where all of the day-to-day activity takes place. The main recommendation is that would affect the ending balances that staff is recommending that the town contribute an additional $1 million to the pension stabilization trust that has been established by the town. As was previously reported to the town council, the ending balance of the general fund increased by $3 million in the previous fiscal year, which is $2 million more than was projected. That's primarily because of increased revenue, mostly sales tax. So by transferring this $1 million to the trust, the pension trust, the town's ending balance in the operating fund will be approximately $5.9 million as of this coming June, which is a 29% reserve. It doesn't include the deficit in the Park Madera Center. When that is deducted, the reserve is still 18%, and a 10% is what has been approved by the town council. These numbers don't include all of the other funds that roll up into the general fund, such as the Corte Madera Sales Tax Fund, the Equipment and Technology Fund, and the Recreation Capital Fund. The combined ending balance of all of those funds is $16.4 million as of last June, and that will be presented to the town council at the next meeting when the financial statements are presented by the town's auditor. The other proposed adjustments for the general fund don't have any net effect on the ending balance, as they all zero each other out. It's increasing interest revenue in the amount of $210,000, and then adding legal expenditures of $100,000, increasing the legal budget, and then adding the salaries and benefits for the building, in the building department, for a position that wasn't included in the adopted budget. So that's the general fund. The Equipment and Technology Fund, which is funded by the general fund, it has one revision proposed, which is to add about $53,560 to the budget. That's for an ambulance that was purchased, which was in the adopted budget, but ended up costing more than had been projected. So that's the Equipment and Technology Fund. And then the capital budget, there are 4 funds that are affected by this, and all of the various revisions which are listed in the staff report. That this list was developed in consultation with the Public Works Director. So the 4 funds that would be affected by this would be the Storm Drainage Tax Fund. That fund is no longer collecting any money. That tax is no longer in effect, but it has still a balance in it, which we're anticipating in spending this year, and then the fund will be closed. The Measure A Parks Fund, increasing the expenditures there by a little more than $100,000, would expend most of the balance of that fund, which is from Measure A tax. It's a tax that the county allocates to the town, and this can only be spent on park expenditures, can't be spent on anything else. The Street Impact Fees Fund, this is funded by fees that are collected, which are intended to defray the impact to the streets. And there was a project in there that Public Works anticipates spending $100,000 less on this year than originally budgeted. And then there are several, many revisions to the Corte Madera Sales Tax Fund, the greatest being a decrease to the in the amount of $1.3 million to the amount that had originally been budgeted for construction of Town Hall, which isn't going to be taking place this year. So overall, the capital expenditures are decreasing by $261,000, and all of the various projects are listed in the staff report. So I'd be glad to try to answer any questions.
I have one quick question, please. The Ring Mountain Trailhead, that's just a timing savings, that doesn't
Right.
represent any pulling back from the scope of work
I don't
along
think so.
that
No,
road.
there's, I think $1.2 million budgeted for in the next fiscal year, not this
Right.
fiscal year. That's
And
yeah.
funds that we expect to collect from Adam, the developer of the reserve, the preserve, right? We're talking about the improvements of roadside improvements and trail improvements along Paradise Drive essentially from Ring Mountain, opposite the school, out to our border at the preserve. That we're still anticipating getting about $500,000 from the developer of that preserve.
It was $250,000.
250. Okay, so that we're not cutting back the scope. We're still aiming to do that work. We're simply saying we're not spending it this year, so it rolls. Okay, and similarly, the town hall savings is only because of timing. It's not a matter of changing scope. Okay, thank you.
Sloan?
Thank you, by the way, Daria. As usual, I like your clear reporting.
Thank you.
What is the nature, or maybe Teresa needs to answer this, and it's not intended to be, just curious, what is the nature of the roughly 1/3 addition to the legal budget? Is it for ordinance work, or is it related to litigation, or why is it so much more for attorney fees than we anticipated?
A lot of it had to do with code enforcement work.
Code, what does that mean exactly? Like, how do the attorneys get involved in, like, to tell a resident that they're going to be sued for nuisance or something? What does that mean?
Abatement. The abatement process.
I see. Got it.
So we had to file, with the Superior Court. And I'll just tell you that if you look at the roles and responsibilities of the town attorney and what they are supposed to review, we've been lucky on the litigation front, but there have been a lot of cases where we've been able to get out of litigation due to using our town attorney and how we've negotiated some of those issues. And so there's been a lot of land use. There's been a lot of kind of negotiations behind the scenes on issues, a lot of ordinances. And so over the last since 2016, of really trying to figure out what that budget should be, I think it's been a little bit low to begin with, and so it's not really fair, I think.
Yeah, no, please understand that I actually, as you know, I'm very fond of you and your firm. I think you guys do. I'm just telling you professionally, we have good lawyers, very, very skilled lawyers. I just was curious why, because it's a fairly dramatic difference. It's almost 1/3 more. It's okay. I just was curious what was happening.
I think some of it in the fund too. I think when we get to the end of the year, there'll be an accounting that'll take place. And if you look at legal fees at the end of the year, you'll have this account, but you'll also have reimbursement from the sales tax measure that speaks to all the abatement work. And you'll also have money where we'll charge from this account and we'll charge it back to the insurance fund that we have on some of the litigation. And so this is just an accounting thing to begin, at the mid-year point. But I think you'll see some reallocation of that budget towards the end of the year. So we're just being conservative at this point.
Okay.
But the bottom line of our budget, we do anticipate to have a surplus at the end of the year.
Thank you.
One question?
Any more questions?
One more.
Go ahead.
You sent us some data today, and I didn't get a really chance to read it, about pension payments and the plan to pay
Yes.
pensions off. Yeah.
Yes, using the GovInvest software that the town purchased, and using the most recent information from CalPERS actuarial, and assuming a 5% discount rate going forward.
Which is lower than what they're assuming right now.
CalPERS
We're being
7%,
2
right.
percentage points lower.
Yes, being a little bit more conservative, and assuming that we make the trust payments as budgeted, and this $1 million is also included in that assumption. That by, I think it was either 2034 or 2035, that the pension would be fully funded, including, all the payments that we're making.
So that was my question. So the $1 million was included in the data you sent us. But
yes.
We would actually be fully funded on pension liability by 2034,
Yes.
given the current scenario, which is remarkable. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
And
Thank
at
you.
that same time, the medical benefits will be fully funded.
Yeah, OPEB is too.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think that a lot of people in this room, one of the legacies of this council, that probably you'll only know that you were part of that and you did that if, through the finance committee and the work of the council and staff, we did a few things that are really remarkable when you think about the budget moving forward, and it's a story that I think we need to tell. And really what we've done is, again, we've taken what we think it should be, 5%, really a discount rate, which is, it almost doubles our unfunded liability but taking that number, putting it on paper and saying, how are we going to solve it, developing a 10-year plan, and by 2034, we plan on being fully funded. We also plan on having our retiree health fully funded in 2032. We also we took the worst deficit this town has ever exhibited. It was in the 2000s. It was over a 5-year span. It was $2.5 million. With our economic development and our revenue streams as we plan the next 10 years and how we did the pension trust, we could sustain 3 times that deficit and not freeze positions. And that's important to realize. We've also, on the capital improvement side, because we are susceptible to sea level rise, climate change, and earthquakes, we have an $88 million revenue stream over the next 10 years. That means our planning, building, and public works teams will be, and sanitary district will be working hard. 30 million of that is the sanitary district, 50 million of that is our infrastructure and facilities, and 8 million of that is fire prevention and emergency disaster preparedness. There's not another community in the state of California that I know of as your town manager that can say that, and it's a story that needs to be told. You know, so I'm proud of it. It goes into it, and so it also ties into facilities. When people say there's a $10 million project coming, realize that's part of an $88 million 10-year infrastructure plan. It's not at the expense of anything. We're working within our means. We've actually given back a tax to our taxpayers back 2 years ago. I think that this council, you know, kudos to you. It's really the legacy. You've set us up for success moving forward, and it's a great story. So,
Thank you. That's my question.
I'll make the motion, we adopt the, have we already done public comment?
No.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
We're just doing questions.
My bad.
Public comment?
No public
Bring it
comment
back.
on the Skunk
Just-
Hollow revitalization, Skunk Hollow
I
program?
just want to thank you guys because I was here for that deficit and it was horrible. And I have watched all the work you guys have done in the past few years to get us to where we are, and it is absolutely remarkable. I mean, the people of the town do not realize how lucky they are or in what good shape we're in. And I cannot thank you guys enough because you have just done an incredible job in getting us into this, because we're in a really good place right now financially. I mean, I can't believe how good we are. I can't believe, as you said, I don't know if certainly not a better town in the county, maybe in the whole state is in better shape. So thank you for all your work, really, Tari, I appreciate it.
The speed with which you're able to correct Bob's errors is remarkable. So nice work. I think that was really able.
I got us in deep.
Come on, let's don't take ourselves too seriously. Okay, I'll make a motion that we adopt. You guys, anybody else want to compliment anybody, or can we? Okay, I'll make a motion that we adopt Resolution 22/2019.
Second.
Second.
I'm just messing with you.
Councilmember Bailey.
Yes.
Councilmember Kuhnhart.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beckman.
Yes.
Mayor Andrews.
Yes. So the next item is town manager and council reports. Town manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You took my steam away on that last report, so I'm going to keep it simple. We're continuing and I think it's very important. We're continuing the town hall project conversation with the community. Our next meeting is at the community center next Thursday, the 30th at 6 p.m. And we're going to continue to take the feedback that we received and keep working on this project as it heads towards the Planning Commission. So, thank you.
Any council reports?
No, not for me.
Yes, just want to keep you up on some things that are moving along with Transportation Authority of Marin. You remember from our last MCCMC meeting up in Novato, there was a discussion of the FASTER proposal with just a gigantic transportation projects potential funding. Well, that has moved to the state legislature on a 2-year bill format beginning this year. There's still no lead agency approved for that. So, but the TAM board and the TAM staff and board came together and said, okay, if you're going to really ask for these big picture things, here are the big picture things that matter for us. Highway 37, something to do with the repair of the Richmond-Santa Fe Bridge and some other big ones. Anyway, so it's not moving faster. It is. Then let's see. Asked about the decision on moving ahead with the widening of that pathway that crosses Corte Madera Creek. Several people have asked me, bicyclists in particular, where is that going? It was supposed to be started in the fall. Well, we were told this last week that the design approval by Caltrans of the widening of the shoulder of the crossing of Corte Madera Creek for bicycles and pedestrians is imminent.
David, which one are you talking about?
This would be the east side of the bridge, the 101 bridge that crosses over Corte Madera Creek. It's now sort of 1.5 bicycles wide, so it's really awkward to.
I know what you mean.
And that is going to be a 10 to 12 foot wide, using the already built abutments that are already in place. But it's an expensive project, and Caltrans is still muddling with the cost. Similarly, the widening of the Bellum off-ramp, 101 northbound, has been stalled by a budget shortfall. They discovered bay mud, surprise, surprise, and some environmental considerations, and negotiation with adjacent property owners. So that's looking for additional money. There's about $170,000 extra that is up this Thursday in Tim's board to allocate to design. We'll see if that happens. Also up this Thursday is the appointment of Eric Lucan of Novato as the SMART Chair. And just as a future warning of activity, the East Blythedale redesign, similar to the Miller Avenue redesign, but simpler, that they say, from downtown Mill Valley all the way out to the highway, is commencing if TAM authorizes that, and it looks as though they will be doing that. So that's in our future. That is all.
A few quick items, Mr. Mayor. The first, the Central Marin Sanitation Agency is now exporting power to the grid. They are now selling energy generated from sewage to MCE, so that's a really awesome, exciting milestone there. Another item, this council voted before taking any action on this petition we received regarding Amazon reusing packaging materials. We voted that we would reach out to Amazon first. I've had a very hard time getting a hold of them, but I finally got a meeting set up for tomorrow, so I will report back for you guys at the next meeting. Last thing, the League of Cities, I will be in Sacramento on Thursday for a policy committee meeting there. They just sent out an email regarding Senate Bill 50. That's another Scott Wiener creation. And so they are recommending that we oppose that. They provided a sample letter, which I will forward to the mayor for consideration. And that is all. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. What I have to report is, and it sort of involves transition from the current council to the future council, and also making certain that we don't run into the Brown Act issues. But basically, the mayor of San Jose has been contacting me repeatedly to get us to sign on to supporting a ratepayer-owned PG&E. Okay, I've sort of deferred and refused to take a position on that one way or another for a couple of reasons. One, I'd want to take it before the council. But also previously, the council had sort of had a understanding or unwritten policy that if an issue came up, that there was a group that we were a member of that would have expertise, we would look to them for guidance. In this case, a ratepayer-owned PG&E would directly impact Marin Clean Energy. So I'm waiting to hear from Marin Clean Energy whether they want us to fully support it, fully oppose it. I spoke with them, and their position is individual politicians can, or individual officials can take a position one way or another, but Marin Clean Energy is not taking a position right now because there's a lot of details that this proposal needs clarification before they can recommend supporting it, opposing it, or taking a position one way or another. So anyway, that way, new council people, you're apprised of what I've done. Old council people. And
Take that, hot potato.
Yeah, which brings us to the next item, which is the agenda for the next council meeting, and if anybody would like anything added to it, including that, all ears, so.
Can I ask a question about one of the items? How many applications for the new Climate Action Committee have we received approximately?
Do you recall how many I told you received a few days ago?
No,
I think you said 9.
I'm thinking 9. Like, I got 3 today, which I think
great.
is either brings us to 9 or 10.
Great, fantastic, thank you. So we should have something to report.
Are we going to start interviewing for planning commission people? Because we have at least, and Parks and Rec, I mean, we have people, presumably they're going to be vacating those spots here in the foreseeable future. It would make sense to interview now so that in the same way that our future council members are dutifully attending today's hearing, their replacements could be attending those meetings.
And would we want to throw in Parks and Rec as well?
That's what I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say, both Parks and Rec and planning.
Good point, Mr. Bailey. Planning ahead.
Unless you guys aren't going to leave, right?
You're assuming they're going to get.
Are they going to run away now that they're in?
We still have to get elected.
That's
You're assuming
right.
they're going to get elected.
Yeah.
There's an election.
Okay.
Wait, can you not do it because there's an election or something?
Well, there is a possibility, of course, always of a write-in candidate, so it is not for certain that the 2 individuals in here today will actually be elected, although I think that everyone thinks that is probably going to happen given that there is no write-in candidate, at least at this point. You could certainly start the process.
But we're kind of limited and obstructed by the bureaucracy that this council imposed by having a new election. Is that what you're saying?
That's not what I'm saying.
Bob, where were you?
But nice try. I would say that you could start the process. I would recommend that you not make an appointment because an appointment would need to be contingent unless you are sort of putting the candidates in the position of vacating their current position.
Okay. We'll just wait. It's all good.
See.
What's the normal cycle of the rest of appointments? What's the normal cycle?
Typically, we open the window for applications in early March, and then it closes about 4 to 6 weeks later, depending on how many applications we receive. And then we interview, and then the new, either the reappointed or newly appointed commissioners would take their seats effective July 1st for 2-year seats. I believe that on the Planning Commission, Commissioner Lee would have slightly over 1 year left, that if he were to be elected to the town council, he would be vacating 1 year and a month or 2 of his seat. And I believe that Commissioner Casisa is up for reappointment this year to a new 2-year term.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I recommend that we start the process. We don't appoint anyone, but we started. If you look at the timeline, it's going to fall right into place, right around the time we get to April. So we should start the process.
I like that response.
Okay,
That's
then.
effective. Thank you.
To a great
Raising
question.
it.
Catch, Sloan.
Okay.
I'm glad that you're still thinking about the future, even though you're not planning on being with us.
Can't get rid of me that easy.
By the way,
Sloan's the writing candidate.
with respect to succession, can we get Jim's commitment that he will still serve on the Finance Committee? Is that something that we can do?
I've already locked him down on that, so don't ask him and give him an opportunity to change his
I want him to say it in
response.
public. I want him to say it in public.
Okay, good. So, and town council move to sanitary district?
Yep. Okay. So, can I adjourn?
Yes.
Okay. The council meeting's adjourned. The sanitary district number 2, a subsidiary of the town of Corte Madera, its board meeting for Tuesday, January 21st, 2020 is in session.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis.
Okay. I'm going to do roll call. Roll call?
Do we want to do a roll call?
Roll call, but not Pledge of Allegiance. I mean, yeah.
Board Member Bailey.
Here.
Board Member Kuhnhart.
Here.
Board Member Ravazio.
Here.
Board Vice President Beckman.
Here.
Board President Andrews.
Here. Okay. Do we need the pledge again?
I would make a motion that we skip the salute to the flag, having already
Second
done.
that.
Okay. Okay. By unanimous consent, we're going to
Unanimous
skip it.
consent,
Okay. Open time for public comments. No public, okay. Presentations, none. Consent calendar. Any motions? Anybody
To
want to
approve
pose?
items 4A through 4D.
Second.
Board Member Bailey.
Yes.
Board Member Kuhnhart.
Yes.
Board Member Ravazio.
Yes.
Board Vice President Beckman.
Yes.
Board President Andrews.
Yes, okay. Next item is 6A, consideration and possible adoption of Resolution 2020, approving the mid-year budget revision.
Okay, this item is the mid-year budget revision for the sanitary district. You also have this staff report before you, which again lists all of the changes to the capital budget. The list also was developed with the help of the Public Works Director. This budget revision would increase the capital budget by approximately $2.5 million in the current year. And would result in $6.9 million at the end of the current fiscal year being available for operating costs and capital projects in the future instead of $9.4 million as estimated in the adopted budget. One other item is that the Finance Committee has recommended a $2.5 million reserve be established, and will bring a resolution to this effect in 2020-21.
Any questions? Any public questions? Any motions?
Move to approve the attached resolution revising the 2019-20 budget.
Second.
Item 6B, sanitary district project.
take a vote.
I'm sorry.
Skipping
Board Member
ahead.
Bailey.
Yes.
Board Member Kuhnhart.
Yes.
Board Member Ravazio.
Yes.
Board Vice President Beckman.
Yes.
Board President Andrews.
Yes. Okay. All right. I had a good running start. Item 6B, sanitary district projects update.
Good evening, Board President and board members. I'm RJ Suko, District Manager for Sanitary District 2. Alongside me is Fernanda Stefanik, our Project Manager. She does a lot of the heavy lifting for the district, and we're here to give you a brief overview of some of the highlights that we're working on for ST2, as well as kind of recap some of the accomplishments from 2019 and some of the projects we've delivered.
You're flipping.
Oh.
Systems down, shields offline.
Technical difficulty?
Can't go wrong, we'll go wrong.
Anyway, so hopefully that works.
There we go. All right. All right. So here's just a brief overview of our service area. The district serves all of Corte Madera, parts of Tiburon, parts of County, parts of Larkspur. Oops. Actually, let me start back. I think we had a... There you go. So 4.5 square miles serving Corte Madera and portions of Larkspur, Tiburon, and Marin County. We do not treat effluent or sewage here. We send that to Central Marin Sanitation Agency. That is located off Anderson Drive. And then also, in general, we have 45 miles of gravity sewer pipe, 2 miles of force main, and 19 pump stations that we maintain on a regular basis. Before I go any further, if anyone would like a paper copy of the PowerPoint slides, we have them in the back if you're having any issues with seeing the text on the screen. Yeah, and we're happy to post it on the web. So here's just a map of our beautiful town and service area. If you squint well enough, those yellow squares say PS for pump stations, so we have 19 of them dispersed throughout our service area. Just breaking them down by major and minor. As you can see, there's quite a lot of pink on there, and if you follow the legend, the bulk of our effluent goes through our Paradise pump station, which is right there in between Paradise and San Clemente, and is sent through a force main, which is a pressurized pipe, down Redwood Highway, underneath Corte Madera Creek, to the other side of Corte Madera Creek and Sir Francis Drake and beyond. We do also have some others that we consider major pump stations in Pfeiffer, Trailer Court, and Village. And then feeding into those pump stations, you can see here are the other 15 or so minor pump stations that serve smaller service areas, but that tie into the overall network. And this just goes to show some of the amount of effort that goes into maintaining these systems and making sure that there are no stoppages in any of the pump stations, that all of our effluent continues to pass through town to where it's treated at CMSA. This slide is worth glancing at and looking at the legend. In particular, you'll notice it has a list of estimated construction year for the various pipes. It's worth pointing out there's a lot of purple, which shows original installation between 1923 and 1964. So basically the story we're telling here is we have a lot of aging infrastructure, and so it's very important that we continue to make investments in it and regularly deliver projects to make sure we're hopefully improving this overall system, and not letting it degrade and keeping up with it. Many of the original pipes were clay pipe that are susceptible to leakage and fracture, and so as we go in, we're trying to install more robust pipes in other systems, and so that's kind of our practice as we move forward. One noteworthy highlight that Fernanda can speak to, but in August of 2018, the private sewer ladder ordinance went into effect, and so there are 4 triggers that result in property owners having to pass a pressure test, which often requires them to replace their private sewer lateral. So that is when you have a building permit of $50,000 or more, if there's a transfer in title, if it's connected to a capital improvement project, mainly for paving the road or repairing the pipe, we're going to have the private sewer lateral tested and upgraded if needed. And then if there's a backup, so if there's an overflow, then there's a notice of repair for them to bring their private sewer lateral up to code. And why that's important is partly because it's doing a great job in minimizing the effluent into the system that's unnecessary and backs up the CMSA plant, but also it's been quite a big time investment for staff. We've almost doubled the amount of permits we're processing, and so you want to speak to that some?
Yes. Since we started the lateral ordinance, we brought to code 300 laterals. It was approximately year to year, August to August, 154 properties had their lateral inspected and brought to code. From the 300, 81 was triggered by a building permit. 32 were failures. 133 were sale, and 54 CIPs. However, we still on the CIP project from this year, and the total properties triggered by the CIP are 130. So from 130, we had 40 that came in. The other 14 was for the Chapman parking, for Chapman Drive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we pave. So before the lateral ordinance was affected, we had approximately 75 sewer permits total for the year. So it was a huge increase.
And prior to the ordinance, many of those permits weren't full replacements. Yes. They were just partial and kind of the minimum to get things moving again?
Yeah, it was spots repairs, no pressure tests, so it was not really contained all the ionized infiltration on the system.
Another shift is Fernanda's spearheading this new district software, which will help us, manage workflow much more efficiently.
Yes, I have been working closely with Ross Valley, and their software was really cool. So I was putting efforts, and we purchased the software where we can collect all the data from sanitary in one source, and also manage them. So have our crew work orders. So we created over 28 forms of work orders for our crew to use out in the field, lateral inspections. So we're keeping all the records since the lateral ordinance was affected. We're tracking everything, CCTVs, projects. We start to enter the data from master planning, so it will be much easier to manage and save us a lot of time later.
So overall, we're trying to go with electronic forms and reduce, our burden on paper forms. It saves time. It's more efficient. The goal is to be in a spot where we're out in the field with a tablet and everything that we need is right there.
Yes.
Here's just, yeah, go ahead.
This is an example of form that we created. When I started, we created a package, paper package for sewer overflow, and now I transitioned that from the tablets where the crew starts filling up off there. So they can click on the property, all the data from the property comes up, so there's no mistakes on typing, things like that. And also, the new release now, they have a hard time, the crew, to create volume calculations. With these, we kind of help them. We create some formulas inside. Also, they can draw. They can take a picture and draw the area of the spill. And they just need to type the average of depth, and the program calculate the volume. Okay. So it's making much easier on the crew as well to collect the data.
Yeah, so the database is, has much more information in it, and they can draw these polygons and automatically formulate some volumes, which is great for our maintenance staff. These are just some other bullets on things we're doing to be proactive. Some of these are training. These are equipment devices that help detect overflows before they happen. Anything else you want to talk about? Partnerships?
Yeah, we're working very close with CMSA, Ross Valley, San Rafael. We're like a team right now, one helping each other, sharing information, data, tools, and everything. So it's a huge improvement for us.
And then we'll try to rapid fire these, but there's a number of projects that we'd like to touch on, and then just a couple touch on for future work that will be coming your way shortly.
The Pfeiffer Pump Station, we start the project in September. The contractor has been paid for the majority of the pump station contract of $654,000, and now the only part remaining is the retention. We're pretty much done with the project, where we epoxy coat all the wet well, install 2 new large capacity pumps, upgrade the motor control center for the new generator, and install a new generator and a weather protection canopy too. So when the crew is there, they're protected on the rain, because most of the time they're there is when it's raining.
And it also protects the equipment.
Yes, of course. Our Trinidad pump station is our oldest pump station, and we're finally upgrading, which is a huge improvement for the sanitary district. We're reducing risk of SSOs. Staff maintenance and overtime was huge in that station, and safety, work safety. They install a new gravity line, temporary pumps, remove existing pump station, install the new wet well and valve pit. They're work on the concrete pads finishing plan for this month. Electrical equipment has been factor test and is planning to installation in February. The site improvements have started and included stacked stone walls, so we're gonna have like a little retaining wall. You can see in the last picture.
For better site access.
Yeah, for size access and clean view too for the neighborhood. And we're 85% all the project complete.
This is Tiburon, right?
Yeah, this
Yes,
serves,
Paradise Key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did we have to redo the lines there too, because they were sinking and going below grade? Was that part of this project as well, or was that a different project?
No,
There were a couple hundred feet of pipe that was replaced, but it's possible in the 10-year horizon we might have to do some sewer rehab through the neighborhood.
Because it's actually because the land is sinking and the pipes are sinking. And
yes.
They're actually considered functional now, and then given the county paved them several years ago, we're probably hands off for the.
It's
you know, for a
moratorium
while,
roads
yeah.
there, so we need to wait till later to do any sewer work there.
Yeah, I remember there was sort of an emergency approval to
Yeah, it was
rework
really
the
bad.
pipes
Right.
before they resurface the streets, and then
Yeah, Bracken did some work there
Yeah.
prior
Yeah.
and put some ductile pipes and stuff there.
Yeah.
So right now they're serving okay. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The pump station was the one needed.
Right.
Okay.
We also did some boardwalk A and B motor control center update with CMSA, and that was necessary as well. Our 2018 sewer rehabilitation project, we did Chapman Park, which we replaced 5,000 linear feet of 6 and 8-inch sewer mains and 91 lower sewer laterals with the PSL pilot program so far. We also did Montecito Drive, where we replaced 760 linear feet of 6-inch sewer pipe and 15 lower sewer laterals. And we are doing right now Tamal Vista Boulevard and Carlson Crest, replacing 2,130 linear feet of 6 and 8-inch sewer mains and 24 lower laterals.
So our construction contract has a few more weeks, but then portion of the homeowners still have to come in and do the upper laterals, but many of them already completed that as well.
So for the CAPs, when we finish the area, we are out, the contractor is out, we send a letter and give them 180 days to come and do their upper. So we're out of their way.
Excellent.
Some more pictures from each of the streets.
Paradise pump stations, variable frequency drivers. We're updating 3 of the big pumps. 2 of them were installed. The VFT controls PG power to the pump stations to allow them to run at the correct flow and speed for needed matching sewer flows. Power frequency harmonics of the systems are being tested to ensure pump system is working smoothly together before project assembly, and expecting completion in end of February.
These are the nicest pump stations I've ever seen. These are remarkable.
It's a lot of work, but the Paradise Pump Stations is our major station, so we always need to be working and be ahead of the game to not have any surprise, because if we have any surprise there, no one's going to be happy with us.
I've seen lots of pump stations. They don't look like this.
Yeah, and CMSA has done a great job
Yeah.
of maintaining those with us. So.
Now, you mentioned something about PG&E
Yes.
power. What happens?
So the VFGs control the PG power to the pumps. So on
What
the power
happened?
outage,
Right.
so they turn off and like they press like in goes to the generator.
Okay.
So at
So
Paradise
we have
Pump
a
Station, we
huge
have
generator.
a 4,000 gallon diesel
Yes.
tank that feeds the generator. And so that gave us, if I had to recall, about 5 days of,
Yes, 5 days.
of service. So toward the end of our last PSPS, we were calling in trucks to bring in more diesel. So.
Okay.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow. Good.
Are we able to use the new renewable clean diesel that actually makes motors last longer?
I don't believe so. We were using conventional, but we can look into that.
Santa Fe does.
Okay.
Was not easy to get diesel either, right?
No, it was a challenge just to get good old fashioned diesel. So.
Yeah.
Imported all the way from Point Richmond?
A number of locations. Actually, Chevron helped us out a little bit. We had some contractors we were to call, and they did some services to Richmond, and then also flyers out of Sonoma came down as well. Yeah. So this was an item that was on consent for notice of completion. Just thought we'd spend a little time to explain why it took so long to make it to council. So this is the emergency air release valve project, which started as a pothole investigation. Based on observations, it got elevated into an emergency declaration. Essentially, the work was completed in October of this year, but with billing, with project closeout, we didn't bring it forward to council until we had it all wrapped up with a nice bow on it. And so the critical part was 3 nights of night work to really stabilize the force main. And then beyond that, it was further design, further procurement of parts for the air release valves, for the manholes, and actually moving that all forward. But this was probably our highest risk
This was
facility that we knew
biggest
of.
project.
Yeah, so it's...
This was at the interchange by the bay, right?
Exactly, yep. So nice to have that one off our plate, and we'll start focusing on the next highest priority. We'll also plan to get a bunch of repair clamps to have just in case, because many of those take 6 weeks to get a clamp if you don't have one. And so
now that we have the measurements, we know the size of the first mains.
Right.
It's easy to order them and have in stock.
yeah, you might get lucky by borrowing one from a partnering agency or getting one shipped from across the country, but better to have something on hand if you can. And here are some photos from the night work. So kind of in the top,
He's on the Lexburg pump station. Storm drain pump station.
so essentially we had these saddles custom built that were put on the faulty assemblies to really encapsulate it. And what was happening was this, we call it a nipple. This is galvanized, and it was installed 20 plus years ago. So really there was no confidence that it would hold for any amount of time. And so by sealing it off, we've now contained it, and then in most cases we put a side-by-side air release valve right next to it. So we had a brand new assembly, and that was what came weeks after the critical night work.
On the second, go back 1 minute. On the second day 2, if you look at picture number 4, yes, our pipe was almost totally on the RV, was totally blocked with grease. So had an air bubble in the entire force main. So the capacity on the force main was reduced by 40%.
Right, so
Which was forcing our pumps and our pump stations run much more than they should.
So the air release valves are located at your vertical high points to let air out, so you have a full liquid flow through your pipe. And when your air release valve is either you don't have one or it's not functioning, in this case where it was clogged, we were pushing air through, so we had half the capacity, which makes the whole system work harder. So that was actually something we discovered even after we decided to do the replacement, but I'm glad we did, because that would have reduced our functionality quite significantly.
Can I ask, going back, what originally tipped you that you needed to look at that?
So there were some conversations and some informal memos amongst prior staff, but really it was, CMSA, other agencies saying, hey, we did a repair in 2016, but it wasn't meant to go this long. Okay. It was kind of a Band-Aid. You guys really should expose it, take a better look.
Okay.
I think many of those, it was something just happened in the middle of the night, and they just did a Band-Aid.
Yeah, they did a Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
And when we opened and look at it, was like, we need to jump in.
Good.
We're doing a design for adding 2 flow meters for 2 major pump stations, trailer court in the village. The design is almost done. And also upgrade the PG&E's reviewing the gas meter so we can update our generator. This is the oldest generator the sanitary district has. And this definitely needs work, but the space is very small, and the only way to keep inside the way it is if is PG&E approve us to keep a gas generator. So we're working with them on that. That's the only thing really pending in this project. And also we had the motor control plan and for Sausalito pump station, and we had previous design with Trindade pump station, and we separated. We are adding to this project too. So we are planning to bid in May and start constructions early summer. That should be, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the switch.
Just forecasting some other upcoming projects. So we have a sewer rehab that's going to occur in Marina Village, and then also on Flying Cloud and Pacific Queen. Those roads will be followed by some level of resurfacing the following summer, so tentatively 2021.
And then we have Meadows Switch Drive, sewer trunk, line rehabilitation, I&I reduction. This is a major sewer segment that we have. Then bring all the west side of the town sewage to Paradise, to the so we cannot have problems in that. And
what's I&I?
Oh,
Inflow and
infiltration.
Yeah, so
It's leaking, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
yeah,
Leaking
yeah.
system,
Groundwater
yes.
gets into the system, or roots intrude the pipe and create cracks in the system that allow water, and you're pushing more effluent than you would if you had nice sealed pipes.
And then you have capacity issue on the pump stations.
Right, and then if there's high storm events, there's on occasion you could have CMSA not be able to keep up with the overall volumes, which
And
is
ratepayers are also paying to treat all that stormwater.
Exactly.
Yes,
That gets into the
exactly.
system.
We're paying the flow off.
Right, that's a good point.
And they're also paying when there's overcapacity and too much water, and we have to dump it in.
And then we have the
Yeah,
fines
uh-huh.
too,
Yep.
that comes with.
Yes, expensive.
So we have been doing the design studies right now. The topo survey of the project was done. They're working alternative pipe layouts designs. Plans are being developed for this project, and utilities collect information. We did a substantial cleaning and pipe investigation, doing a CCTV televising the whole line to make sure we don't have major surprises in the winter. We did some pothole investigations and soil borings to start in spring, and we hope the construction is planned for next year. When we were doing a CCTV, all the lighting, this pipe was lighting, and all the lighting failed pretty much. And it's a concrete pipe. You can see some sections, you can see all the steel from the concrete pipe, concrete and first pipe. And
the black things there is what we took off, all these grits and debris from the pipe.
So reducing the capacity significantly.
Yes. So our major sewer had capacity, and it has a lot of I&I right now, infiltration leaks on the system. So it is major issue, and we're working on, and we want to
Is this,
address this as soon as possible.
is this the Marin Joe's issue as well?
No,
no.
no.
That's
This is below.
This is below, okay.
Yes.
Wait,
If you go back
Manjos
in
is
the
below.
other slide, go back one, there's the
Manjos
area.
is up.
This is from here, Taumapais, Meadow Switch, all the way to the dealer.
Through the former Jeep
Yeah.
dealership and then under the freeway.
Okay.
All right.
So the rehabilitation is going to be from Taumapais all the way to the dealer.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
The Maranjos is a different issue.
Got a
Any
couple
questions?
questions. Of all the lateral work that you've reported on, I
Yes.
believe the number was 133 inspections that were keyed off by sales. How many of those resulted in replacements of laterals?
Most of them,
Really?
yeah.
I can just tell you, almost always, when there's a test done for a resale, you end up putting in a sewer lateral in, because unless it's been replaced in the last 10 years,
Yes, if it was not replaced in the last 10 years, pretty much
it's gonna
fail,
fail.
and it's
I mean,
going to do
we
it.
don't even do pressure tests, even when they're recommended, because I think 97% of pressure tests fail. So it's like, why spend $1,000 on the pressure test when you're gonna end up failing and replacing the line anyway? But, and this is consistent across Marin County.
Yeah,
All
it's
we
not
did was,
just
we put a
us.
law in place that
Yes.
basically every sanitary district has in place, and this is happening all over the county, it's not just here.
But what is really interesting too, we had 32 failures. You know, this is when like the homeowner call a plumber and say, I have a spill in my property, I have a shoe inside my bathtub or the lower fixture there. And the plumber usually goes there and they need to do a spot repair. So when they go to the spot repair, they come here for a permit. In the past, they usually just fix that spot repair. Right now, they need to inspect the entire line and everything's failing. So instead of doing one repair, they're replacing two. But 32, then most of the time it didn't come to our attention because they never came for a permit and they just did a little fix it or a little clean. So now all the contractors that work in town, they know the lateral ordinance, they sign up a paper here to pre-qualify, which make, if they get a call, they need to report to us. So that number jump into.
Now, whatever happened with the grants program for helping folks out with laterals?
Yeah, it's been very
It's,
successful.
yeah, everybody's happy.
Yeah,
Very happy
definitely.
about.
We'll take whatever they can get, but it definitely makes the whole system a lot
Everybody's
smoother. It's a pretty tough pill to swallow, regardless,
Yeah.
even if you're not getting any grant, and so it just kind of makes it a little bit easier to handle that shock.
No
It's
one
like-
is
and the
spending
budget-
money with
it's like
sewer,
the budget
right?
is adequate
They
right
want
now?
a door, windows, roof.
The net between the two grants is about adequate. I think we would just shuffle it. Seems like the lower lateral used more than the actual
Low
the
income.
one we call the grant assistance, where anyone not tied to a CIP can just get the $1,500. So
Okay.
perhaps some
Okay.
rebalancing.
All right, good, excellent.
So, first of all, the report's fantastic. I think it's obvious to all five of us that you and your staff does a very good job for the town, and we're grateful to you for it. Two things. One of them, my packet didn't have that report at all in it. It would be useful in the future to provide at least the narrative portion of it so that we can ask smart questions. I mean, I just sat here like watching a TV show, and it's hard to be kind of present. You know what I mean? If you give it to us in writing, the narrative beforehand, then I can think about it a little bit. I didn't always was pestering Bob about where is some, because I like the maps in particular. I just like to be prepared. Second thing is it on our website? Maybe Rebecca's the right one. Is that presentation or is that description? It would be extremely useful.
It wasn't
I see. In particular, the listing of like what happened in 2019 and what projects are planned
Yes.
for 2020. That is I mean, and that's where our tax money's going, and people are happy to pay taxes when they can see it's doing stuff like this. So,
Exactly. The sanitary, like, I feel like always left aside here. Like, you don't see many people interested in here about sewer, you know, until we have a major, until you have a major disaster, and then everybody comes hard on you because no one sees underground, and homeowners don't want to spend the money with laterals when they can spend 10,000 renovating something, front doors, painting the house, roofs, where it could increase on their pockets, you know, coming back to them.
but just, you know, overall, my sense, and I suspect all of our sense, was very good job. Nice work.
Thank you. So it's important for us to be involved more.
And so if I think back to your map where there was gray, which was the pre-Civil War clay pipe.
Yes.
Okay. Folks should expect over the next foreseeable future, the pipes will be dug up and they'll get the street resurfaced.
$30 million worth over the next 10 years.
Okay. Good.
We're doing as many projects as we can deliver right now,
Okay.
and working hard.
Okay, good.
Good.
Mr. Mayor, two more quick questions.
Okay.
You mentioned that the, in the main, down on Meadow Sweet, concrete, you said liner is missing. You mean concrete is missing, or there used to be some kind of plastic liner that is now missing?
So it was a concrete reinforced pipe before, and the concrete was damaging, so they lining the pipe with a type of a PVC kind of thing inside. They blow in and they glue on the pipe. And that lining during the years, I think it was done approximately 20 years ago, and it's pretty much gone right now. There's no lining.
Right. So it was a rehab. You had an original reinforced concrete pipe. It went through multiple decades of service before they added the liner.
Yeah, and now
Okay.
the liner is pretty much gone.
Okay, okay. So that reinforces some earlier things that have, okay. RJ, you sent a very nice letter to those of us who live on Christmas Tree Hill about upcoming inconvenience that we're going to be suffering because of some sewer mains that are going to be replaced. But I don't think you actually listed which streets are going to be affected. Is that something
So I
that you?
believe that letter was more of
For cleaning
cleaning and flushing.
the lines.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that will
Which we do
probably-
every year.
And that will also probably entail some inspection that may identify problems, right?
On our mains, yeah.
They may discover something, but this is pretty routine. I
Yeah.
think it'll probably come and go in the next week and a half, and you won't
Okay.
notice
Okay,
it
so
a
you're
whole
not
lot.
talking about big digging projects?
No,
right?
no,
Okay.
that's just a cleaning
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
maintenance.
And removing roots and that sort of thing.
Any other questions from, any public comment or questions?
Sure.
This underground man.
Charles Lee, 9 Monona Drive. So I had a few questions. So one is, with the special pipe that you installed, it looked like the grease was backing it up. So is that a reoccurring problem with the grease? And therefore, is it an issue with the grease traps, or like what is basically feeding into the system that's causing that problem? Did you look at that as well, besides just capping the problem?
On Meadow Sweet specific? Or
Well, I mean, that was where I saw it, but in general, like...
we do have grease areas, and we are working close with CMSA to enforce all the restaurants, the malls, on capture the grease.
Mm-hmm.
And help us save money with cleaning maintenance. We do have areas like Meadow Sweet, which is not grease, it's more grates. It's like from the holes of the pipe, the concrete falling parts. And
Okay, so the other one is those liners have a certain life expectancy, you know?
Yes,
and so I just had a question if you looked at the warranty and who the original installer
yeah,
was.
they're 20 years, it's pretty much their life.
Okay.
The new liners were supposed to last longer, But that type of liner, yes, 20 years was the life.
Okay. And the other one is recently a head of product design from IDEO. I don't know if you're familiar with that product design company out of San Francisco. Reached out to see if they have a company that's looking for opportunities for new prototypes and exploration to fixed leaky pipes. So if I can give them your contact, I think that there might be nice synergies for.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
If it was, we'll be happy to look into.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay. I guess we don't have to take any action, so district manager report or board member reports?
Nope.
Okay. I guess I'll adjourn this to
No, wait, do we adjourn?
the closed session.
You need to take public comment on the closed session item, and then
Okay.
recess into public session.
Okay. Public comments on the closed session, which are secret.
No comment.
Okay. Anyway.